Hello, and welcome to today's show. How do you know which law schools to apply to? How do you determine if you should be focused on rankings, if you should be focused on scholarship money, if you should be focused on geography, or if you should be considering all of them? For those of you who are new, my name is Sydney Montgomery, and I'm a law school admission consultant specializing in working with first generation and minority applicants. And today is all about figuring out what you should be thinking of when you are trying to decide which law schools to apply to. We're going to cover three different things. The first thing that we're going to cover is rankings. How important are rankings? How should you go about using them in your decision on what schools to put on your law school list? The second thing that we are going to cover is geography and what the best things are. What are those first steps to build your list? How can you go about figuring out what area you want to practice law in if you're not really sure? And how does that even affect what schools you apply to? Then that third thing that we're going to talk about is scholarships. How can you maximize your scholarship opportunities by being strategic about which schools you put on your list? Just for some housekeeping, of course, I'm going to answer all of your questions at the end. So go ahead, feel free to comment away, put your questions. I want to know you. Let me know also in the comments, where are you in this process? Where are you in your journey? Are you just starting to think about applying to law school? Are you thinking about it for next year? Are you in the thick of it? I want to know because I want to be able to connect with you and to help you. I believe that this process is all about relationship building. And so even what I do here with you guys, I want you to feel like you can build that relationship with me. Email me, let me know who you are, where you're listening from. I'd love to get to know you and help you on your journey. Now, a little story first off before we dive in. The reason why it's so important for you to be sure about what schools you put on your list is because it can dramatically change your future. I approached my law school list when I was applying much like my undergrad journey. I wasn't really thinking about my long-term career, and I honestly didn't have a lot of guidance for my college list either. I chose colleges based off of Gilmore Girls. I thought Connecticut was just the best state because Rory and Lorelai grew up in Connecticut and they had that small town feel, and I just thought that's how all of Connecticut was. I got really blessed, y'all. God really had his hand over my life because I ended up going to Princeton, but I basically just applied to schools in Connecticut, and then I applied to schools in New Jersey because New Jersey was next to Connecticut. And then a couple random schools that a couple of my teachers gave me. I didn't really give a lot of time and effort into fit, into affordability, into academic preparedness. I just sort of, I winged it. When it came time to apply to law schools, I want to say that I had learned a lot from that process. But if we're going to be honest, I was 20 when I was building my law school list, and I didn't really learn a lot. And I remember the summer that really changed my life because I was a paralegal intern my junior year, between my junior and senior year of college at WilmerHale in Boston. And shout out to them. It was a great internship, although fully found out that I am not meant for big law. But I spent a lot of my time in that internship building connections. That's one of the things that's really important to me is community building. And if we're also going to be honest, the work was kind of boring. As a paralegal intern, you're not doing exciting things. So I wanted to use every single opportunity to not do the work that was assigned. Not great, I know. But I'm being honest with you guys, right? And so I took the time to get coffee with a bunch of attorneys that went to law schools that I was thinking of, attorneys from my area. And one of the people that I got coffee with was a first year summer associate from Harvard Law School, but she had gone to the University of Maryland, go Terps. And I was like, oh, dope. There's this black girl. First off, there really were not that many of us. So I was like, oh, there's this black girl. She went to Maryland. She's from Maryland. Let me just, let me get coffee with her. Let me figure out. So actually we ended up going to Potbelly's, because I'm not really as adult as I think I am. And I really just wanted a milkshake, y'all. They put the little cookies on the straw. It's really great. I haven't been to Potbelly's in a really long time, but I really miss Potbelly's. But we went, and I remember this so vividly. It was like down State Street in Boston, and we got Potbelly's, and she asked me where I was thinking of applying to school. And I remember telling her, well, I don't really like cities, which is still true. I'm a suburbs girl. I was in Boston for that summer, and again, confirmed, not a city girl. So I was like, well, I don't really like cities, and I don't really like the cold. So I gave her a list of schools, none of which included schools in major cities. So you can imagine, right? I wasn't applying to Harvard. I wasn't applying to NYU. I wasn't applying to Columbia. I wasn't applying to a whole lot of schools. And she looked at me really strange, and she said, direct quote, so what you're gonna do is you're gonna apply to the top 10 schools in the country, and you're gonna go to the best one you get into. And I remember being like, do you know me? Excuse me? How you gonna talk to me like that? How you gonna tell me what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna do what I want to do. What you mean? But 20-year-old me was at least smart enough to know that I actually didn't really have a plan, and it seemed to work out pretty well for her because she's at Harvard Law School. So I listened. Except I didn't apply to University of Chicago because I was like, it's just too cold. Boston, let me tell you, spoiler alert, also just as cold. But I applied to basically the top 10. And then I knew I wanted to come to Maryland. So I applied to the University of Maryland. I applied to Georgetown, GW. So I had my local school set. I cannot thank her enough. Really cannot. Jennifer John, if you are listening, shout out to you for changing my life. And it was cool because we got to be classmates for a little bit. But I wouldn't have applied to Harvard. Harvard was not on my list, at all. Because it was in a city. And that was dumb. That was really dumb of me. I think that I have grown since then. But that's why I say, and I want to talk to you guys about building this list because it's so important. I literally did not have Harvard on my list of schools. And I am so thankful and had a fantastic time at Harvard for law school, and so thankful for my Harvard Law degree that I almost did not get because I almost did not apply because I was out here being foolish. So my goal today is to help you not be like 20-year-old me, just out here thinking about, I was like, oh, the South is nice, full transparency. I was like, listen, ring by spring, that sounds nice too. There was a lot of thoughts that were going on in my head that honestly just make me shake my head right now. It's just like, God, you were smart. You had potential, but you just didn't quite finish that thought all the way. You can be book smart and not street smart. So that's what I was. But it is really important that you have guidance. And if you've learned nothing from my story, it's really important that you tell somebody else your plan for what schools you want to apply to. Because I told her, and she really looked at me like I was the most foolish person that she had spoken to. So I want to make sure that you have the opportunity to ask someone about your school list so they can be like, oh yeah, that sounds like a reasonable plan. Or what are you doing? Let's just completely reverse course. So you can have that little check before you make those decisions. So the first question, of course, that everyone asks me is, how important are rankings? And it is actually a question that I ask students when they want to interview to work with me. I ask them what are the things that are important to them in choosing a law school. Because for me, even though I went to Princeton and Harvard Law, I am not one of those people that says you have to go to the top rated school or prestige is the most important thing. And if you're coming to me and you're like, I want to work with you because I only want to go to the top 5, I don't know. We might not be the best fit because maybe the top 5 is the best fit for you, but maybe it's not. And I want people who are open to really exploring what's going to maximize their long-term happiness and long-term career. So yes, certain schools do open more doors. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that rankings absolutely don't matter and that, there's no difference. But I think it's like very small part of your equation. It really depends on what you want to do. If you want to clerk for the Supreme Court, if you want to work for the ACLU, if you want to work for the Southern Poverty Law Center or the Equal Justice Initiative, yeah, where you go to law school is really going to matter, because truthfully, I mean, you can go there later in your career, but if you're trying to go there right after law school, they really do only hire from certain types of schools. If you're saying it's really important to you that you go to a school with a strong loan repayment assistance program, also, most of the most generous loan repayment assistance programs are going to be found at the top ranked schools. But if we're going to be really honest here, the majority of people want things in their careers that they can get from a wide variety of schools. If you want to be a public defender, if you want to do immigration law, even if you want to do corporate law, mergers and acquisitions, or international transactional law, you actually can get there from a multitude of schools. You're not going to only get there from the top ranked schools. And I want to demystify that for you, because of course, job placement matters, bar passage rate matters. Those are all incredibly important numbers. And if you are not sure where to find those numbers, I would recommend that you go to Law School Transparency. They have completely free reports, and they have reports on every school. They tell you what states those schools send students from after graduation, the employment score, the graduation rate. They will tell you about the diversity of the faculty and the student body. There's so much data that is important. What you're not going to find there is the U.S. News and World Report rankings on those schools, because in a lot of ways, the U.S. News and World Report rankings, they're flawed, right? They're completely flawed, and they don't take into consideration as much as they should diversity and climate, and they weigh things on prestige and they weigh selectivity and they weigh the LSAT and they weigh the GPA a little bit too heavily if you're trying to figure out what's going to be the best thing for your career. The other thing is that when we talk about long-term career success, it can be better to graduate in the top of your class at a middle ranked school than to graduate at the bottom of your class at a higher ranked school. Now, I'm not saying any of you are going to do that, but if we're really weighing two different plausible scenarios, I would rather employ someone who is at the top of their class, because they might have gone to that school for financial reasons, for family reasons. I don't know. As an employer, I'm not assuming if you're at the top of your class at a middle ranked school, I'm not assuming that that's the best school that you got into. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't, but you clearly are killing it no matter what, and that's impressive to me. If you were on journals at that school, if you were really involved in student practice organizations, if you did research, if you got a lot of FaceTime with professors and built strong connections, I mean, that's super impressive to me as an employer. And I will say, as someone who has reviewed resumes, I reviewed resumes for our clerkships when I clerked for a judge in Maryland. That's what I would be looking for. Was it impressive if I saw, a Georgetown? I was in Maryland, so, right, the schools are really like Catholic, Georgetown, University of Maryland, University of Baltimore, George Mason. Those are basically the, UDC, Howard. Those are basically the local schools that we're pulling from American. Was it impressive if I saw Georgetown? Sure. Did it automatically make it to the top of the pile? No. I really love to see what people were involved in a school, what leadership they had, what substantive work they had. You want to go to a school where you're going to get that hands-on experience. That's why I say clinics and journals are so important, because as someone who reviews resumes, that is what stood out to me. Wow, you've already handled so many cases. Oh my goodness, you've got papers that are being published, or you presented for this governmental organization. I want to see the practical experiences that you've had, because as an employer, I'm like, great, I don't have to train you as much because I know that you already know. Versus, cool, you could come from Georgetown, but if you've not done anything, if you have kind of a lower GPA, I don't really feel as impressed. I don't really feel as confident about hiring you as I might from someone in the University of Baltimore that just has a ton of experience and a ton of really good recs and a ton of things that can be leveraged in the position. So when you're looking at rankings, I want you to take it with a grain of salt. Yes, you do want to go to, within reason, the best schools that you get into, but you also want to balance finances. So I would never tell someone to go $200,000 in debt and turn down a full ride offer from a very good middle ranked school where I know they're going to be able to get those connections, those employment opportunities, the substantive work on their resume, and graduate with no debt. I mean, long term here, right? That's amazing. That's amazing. Now, there's a lot to weigh there, so I can't really give you just blanket, always choose this type of school or always choose that type of school. But when you're thinking about what schools to put on your list, you should have a mix of national and regional schools. What do I mean by that? National law schools, usually like the top 25, those are schools that are going to have employers who recruit from across the country. Those are schools that are also less likely to focus on state law and more on federal law, but those are schools that, are going to have that national pull for employers. But then you also want to make sure that you have your regional school. So for me, I knew no matter where I went to school, whether it was Texas, California, Boston, I was coming home to Maryland. And so I had my national schools, but I also had a strong contingent of Maryland area law schools. And you want to make sure that you have a balanced list. And honestly, you should have probably more of those regional law schools than national law schools, depending on what your scores and your academic situation is. But even if you have a perfect 180 and a 4.0 GPA, I want you putting some regional schools on your list because those are schools that you can also leverage for scholarship money. You want to make sure, especially as we go into this cycle that will be competitive, that you are maximizing your opportunities for acceptance. So you have a broad list of schools. You might hear people say safety schools. I don't really know about that word, but the concept, right? You want schools that you are confident that you are over the median for. You want some schools where your numbers are within the target range, and then maybe some reach schools. And when you are building that list, this brings me to point number 2, right? How do you go about building your list? What is the first step in building that list? You want to take a look at your academics. Now, I'm going to be just brutally honest with you. Some of you are at a 150 for your LSAT, and you are praying and believing God for a 170, and I'm praying and believing God for your 172. However, do not build your school list based on your 170. I see this so often. People build a school list based on what they plan to get on the LSAT. Sure. How about we build a list that takes into account where you are right now? And how can you fall in love with schools that are within your target range right now? Because that is going to make you so much less stressed. If your entire list is based on you getting some score in the future that you're not sure that you can get, that is pressure, right? Because now you're like, I have to get this score or I won't be able to apply to any school that I love. Alternatively, and I do this with my college kids too, let's just take a look at where you are. All right, that's fine. Listen. If you raise your LSAT score, we can add some schools, or that just means you might get more scholarship money at the schools that we have on your list. But let's take a look at where you are right now and say, okay, how can I build a list? What are the schools that I am above the median for? What are the clinics that they have? Are they doing really cool things? Because when we have this fixation on prestige, we tend to believe that we can only achieve our goals at the top rate schools and that they're the only schools that are worth anything and no one else is doing anything, right? But listen, people go to lower ranked schools, unranked schools, and start their own firms and go to corporate law and become incredibly successful. So don't sleep. Some of them have really fantastic programs too. So I want you to really investigate those schools. How can you fall in love with them such that you're not feeling this pressure? You're going to study for the LSAT, and I want you to do as best as you can. And you're going to make a plan to write really strong essays. And if not, you're going to reach out for help. I'd love to help you with your essays. But you're going to make a plan to do as well as you can in the application process. But you're not going to have the pressure of, I hate, every school that, is below this magical number that I want to get in the future. So look at where you are, build some schools around that. Try to find schools where, again, your numbers are above the median, your numbers are at the median, and maybe a few reach schools where the medians are higher than, what you're currently scoring or what you're even projecting to score. Because I also want to emphasize that the medians are not cutoffs. The medians are medians. A median means that 50% of students at that school scored higher and 50% of students at that school scored lower. And we always forget about this. 50% of the admitted students had an LSAT score that was below the median. It's half the class. So obviously the median cannot be a cutoff because 50% were below that. You just have to remember what the word median means. It is just the number in the middle. It's not even a true average. It's just the number in the middle. Once you take a look at your academics, you want to figure out what are the interests or the interest areas that I want to focus on in law school. And it's okay if you have a couple, 2 or 3. You know that I am really big on pushing you guys to dig deep about what your reason for going to law school, what your why law is, that it should be clear and concise, that it should have an area of law and a people or population that you want to serve or advocate for or hold accountable. And it's not to put you in a box, but it is to give you more focus, because oftentimes if you go to law school unfocused, you end up not maximizing your opportunities while you're in law school. You might end up getting a job that you don't really like. You end up not being fulfilled, and that's why so many lawyers are unhappy with their outcomes, with their careers, because they've never really gotten more specific about why they want to go to law school. So get more specific. Don't just say, I want to be a voice for the voiceless or help the marginalized people, change laws. I want you to really drill down, because also when you do that, then you can see, oh, you know what? I'm really interested in animal rights and human rights, maybe all the rights, mammal rights, if you will. So you might be looking at schools that have those things. Now, I always say you want to look for the most specific niche. So if you're interested in 2 things, for example, if you're interested in criminal justice and animal law, every school is going to have something on criminal justice. Not every school is going to have something on animal law. And you may change your mind and decide that you really don't care about dogs the way that you thought you did. But you don't want to go to a school that's not even going to give you the opportunity to see if you like it. So when you're putting schools on your list, I don't care if it's Harvard or Yale. Do they have animal law or not? Because if you're listen, the ASPCA is my jam, all right? I want to be on the forefront of fighting for animal rights, which is so important. It's not my passion area, but so important. And I have friends, I have a friend that just opened up her whole firm, dealing with animal rights and law. So there's a need for that, right? But not every law school is actually going to teach you about that. And not every law school is going to have clinics about that. Actually, I think it's UCLA that has a whole clinic on dogs. It's so fascinating. But that's what I'm saying. Some schools have really niche, really awesome clinics and hands-on experience and journals, and some schools don't. So you want to be looking to make sure that the schools that are on your list are going to be able to serve what your niche area of interest is. So you're going to, 1, look at your academics. You're going to, 2, look at that area of law, the clinics and the journals. And you want to look at the professors. And then you want to make sure that it's a school that has good career services. So what's the bar passage rate? What's the employment rate? What kind of support do they give you for the bar? What kind of support do they give you as an alum? Maybe if after your first job, if you're trying to change jobs. I know that I contacted Harvard Career Services after my clerkship when I was trying to, go to a family law firm, because I know those are resources factors that are there for me. So you want to make sure that you are looking at that. And then also geography is really important. So where do you want to practice? Because I mentioned there's national law schools and regional law schools, and the regional law schools, right? If you go to a regional law school in Texas, you're going to learn so much Texas law. But if you're trying to then go to Montana, it's just going to be a little difficult for you to get that job there. One, you're not going to know Montana law. But the other thing is that you just aren't going to have employers at your job fairs and that sort of thing. It's possible you can do that. But it's always better if you know, like I knew I wanted to come to Maryland. If you know that there's a geographic area you want to practice in, or at least two, right? Maybe it's California and DC. Or New York and DC. You want to make sure that your school list does reflect that, because then you can get internships during the school year, build those connections that might turn into the job afterwards. And then the last thing that I want to make sure that I talk to you guys about is maximizing your scholarships. So that is going to go towards that balance list, right? Having schools where your numbers are above the median. They're not to look down on, but they're schools where you know you will probably get a decent amount of scholarship money. And it's always good to have those options because you don't know what life is going to throw at you. If you want a good scholarship estimator, LSAT Demon actually has one on their website that I think is pretty fantastic. You can put in your numbers and it will give you a breakdown of how much money you might get. It's just an estimator, right? But whether you might get a full ride or half tuition or more than full ride or less than half, or not likely to get any money at all. So I want you to consider that as you're building your school list. So to kind of, summarize, we talked about how important rankings and prestige are, and that you should take it with a grain of salt, because you want to make sure that you are going to a school that's going to maximize your career, where you can thrive and be at the top of your class, and where you are going to have the support that you need to take that next step. You want to go to a school when you're trying to build your list. You want to make sure that you're looking at academic factors, that you're looking at clinics and journals, that you're looking at geography and professors, and that you're looking at things like bar passage rate and employment rate and diversity, all the things that are needed to make sure that you have the most fulfilling 3 years there, but also that you have a launching pad for your legal career. And then you want to make sure that you are maximizing your scholarship money. So whenever you're building your list, you should have schools that your numbers are above the median, at the median, and maybe some reach schools. And so when we're looking at scholarship dollars, you want schools that you know, because law schools give scholarships in order to incentivize top performing students to come so that they can raise their own medians, right? So you want to go to a school that you know you're going to get solid scholarship money from. So I hope that was really helpful. Building your college list is so important. We actually talk about that in my boot camps. I spend a lot of time talking about that with my students. If you've been wondering, how can I work with you? How can I get in touch with you? If you go to my website, S. Montgomery Consulting, you will see the option, law school admissions. So even if you just go to law.smontgomeryconsulting.com, you will see options for my boot camp. You will see options for private consulting. I have an asynchronous personal statement course that's 50% off. If you have an LSAC fee waiver, there's also some hourly consulting that's 50% off if you have a fee waiver. I try to make things affordable and accessible, but I do want to let you guys know that I only have a couple of spots left for private consulting this cycle. I want to make sure that I can serve all the students that I work with. And we do have boot camps, but they're starting to fill up. So if you're interested in getting guidance, don't hesitate to reach out to me so that we can, make a plan and reserve a space for you for this upcoming cycle. Before I close this out in prayer, I'm just going to look to see if you guys have any questions. Let me just see. No, you guys don't seem to have any questions. Maybe I was super thorough. I'm just going to check. And you guys know that you can always submit questions to bit.ly/breakintolawschool. Any questions you want, whether it's personal, whether it's really specific to your situation, you can definitely always submit those questions. But I don't see any questions, so I'm going to go ahead and pray us out. Please don't hesitate to reach out to me. Email me, comment below, find me on Instagram at Montgomery Consulting, or our podcast at Break Into Law School. That podcast is available on Audible, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. So wherever you get your podcasts, you can listen to the Break Into Law School podcast, where this replay will be, and of course the video will be on our YouTube channel. Dear Heavenly Father, I just want to say thank you for this moment. Thank you for allowing me to be a vessel through which information can flow. Thank you for the yearning that students have to know how to navigate this process as we come toward the end of the month of July. I ask that you would be with students and their anxiety. Just calm them. Let them know that they are confidently and boldly walking into their purpose, and that this is the first step to the rest of their lives, that you have not led them this far to lead them, but that you have brought them this far so that they can take the next step, so that they can start impacting others. So I just ask that you would give them wisdom and discernment with their school list. I ask that you would help them figure out what is a good fit for them, and not just about prestige or rankings or where their parents want them to go or what's going to make them look good, but where are they going to be able to build your kingdom? Where are they going to get fed? Where are they going to be around like-minded students? Where are they going to be in a position to change and create policies that will affect others? Where are they going to get good jobs and summer internships? What career services are going to pour into them? What student groups are going to pour into them? Where are they going to meet their best friends, their friends for life? Where are they going to meet their spouses and partners? I just ask that you would guide them to the schools that you want them to put on their list, that you would guide them with application timing, that you would help them prepare for any exams that they need to take, any essays that they need to write, that you would have them look past what the world sees and look through to how the schools can best serve them so that they can best serve you. Dear Heavenly Father, I just ask that you would be with them on this journey, help them to find the areas of research that would best serve them, to go to information sessions, give them wisdom to ask good questions, give them confidence to step out of their comfort zone and network, reach out to students, reach out to admissions, ask their questions, forge connections, remind them that this process is relational and not transactional, and that you go before them in every conversation. So I also ask that you would open the hearts and minds of all those on the receiving end of their questions and their comments, that you would just imbue a spirit of generosity to admissions, that they would answer their questions, humility and compassion for how difficult it might be for students to reach out, that they would just be welcoming and warm, and that you would also give discernment for schools that they do not need to be applying to. That you would give them a feeling of, no, this school is not for me. That you would give them a sign that, you know what, I think that I'm not meant to be here. I think that I'm meant to be somewhere else. That you would also give them the confidence to say, I know that God is leading me here, and I'm sorry, Mom, and I'm sorry, Dad, and I'm sorry, Aunt and Uncle, but this is where God is leading me to be. So I ask that you just be with them and be with their discernment, that you would just cover them in this process and cover them in their decision making. I thank you for them. I thank you for their heart and for their yearning. And I thank you for all the things that you are going to do in their life. I ask all of this in your son Jesus' name. Amen. So guys, thank you so much for being with me today, for just always showing up and being awesome. Like I said, I love getting to know you, so definitely drop me a line, introduce yourself, let me know where you are in the process, and I cannot wait to see you next week. I'll talk to you guys soon.